Hello, folks. Today is October 26th, and it's the Velero community meeting. Let me share my screen so we can all look at the same. Let's see, share. Can everyone see the agenda? Great. As a reminder, please add yourself as an attendee if you have not done so. And I'll put the link in the chat for handy access. So for status updates, Dave, would you like to give us your update?
Yeah, so let's see. So what are we doing? So item snapshotter, I'm going to try and get that reviewed with everybody this week, and there haven't been any real comments on that. So get that in, hopefully. And still working on the upload progress. I think I got deletion included with the new item snapshotter APIs. And this week I am on support. So, yay.
Any questions for Dave? Great. Wenkai, let us know your update.
Yeah, I fixed 2 CVEs and a bug about the scheduled backup. And next, I'm going to work on the Air plugin to support CSI volume.
Thank you. Any questions for Wenkai? Cool. Looks like Daniel is writing his update. Actually, just while Daniel's doing that, it occurs to me that we have, is it worthwhile to perhaps introduce, we have some new folks, forgive me if I missed this introduction, but we have some new folks at VMware working on Velero, so it might make sense to do introductions. Ming, I know, is here, and I'm not sure if Bruce is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. Bruce, why don't you go first?
Okay.
Just a quick, sorry, I put you on the spot. Just a very quick introduction, if you'd like, or maybe you don't need to. It's up to you. But we've got Scott here and also Feng, who are outside of VMware, and they're frequent attendees of the meeting. So it might be nice for, or you know, actually,
Sure.
sorry, you don't have to introduce yourself if you like. I realize this is recorded, so we don't know who's going to be watching.
Okay. Here it goes. Okay. My name is Bruce.
Yeah. You go. I'm so sorry. Jonas does a much better job of facilitating than I. Feel free to say whatever you'd like.
Okay. My name is Bruce. My Chinese name is Jiangxun. So call me by which name you prefer. I'll be fine with both. Okay, then before I joined VMware, I worked for several public cloud provider in China. For example, the JD Cloud and the Kingsoft Cloud. And my experience is mainly focusing on the Kubernetes service Kubernetes extension and some customized on the public or the private cloud service. Maybe by far that's all what I can think about.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction. And Ming, I don't know if you want to say anything. Totally up to you. Whatever you want to say.
And last week I have introduced myself. So and maybe there is somebody not here, so I will introduce myself again. And my name is Cho Min, which you can remember my name, and it is pronounced like Truman. I like the movie Truman's World. You can call me Truman. Okay. And I worked at the Alibaba Cloud before in the machine learning platform, and I'm doing some work about the Kubernetes Docker development, and in the Alibaba Cloud, I have seen a lot of components in our platform, such as Contour and Harbor, and and others, and Velero, etc. And all of these come from VMware. That is a very amazing things. So I'm very proud of come to this amazing company and amazing team. And that's all. That's all I can speak. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you both. Thank you so much both for being here, and you'll see them around a fair amount more. So
Yeah, thank you. People used to always do that to me in Japan, is put you on the spot, do self-introduction in your second language. And I feel your pain, and thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah, welcome, both of you. It's very glad to have you on our team.
yeah, and sorry for putting me on the spot. It's 8 p.m. in my time. I don't think it's clearly. So back to our usual status updates. Daniel, do you want to let us know what you've been working on?
Yeah, I have been supporting the community issues last week, and yeah, I found the situation that people using very old Velero versions are still writing up issues. So I see Eleanor added up the discussion topic as for the support matrix, so we can discuss that later. And this week I'm working on the AWS plugin to support a CSI volume snapshot. And I will also try to bump up Go 1.17 to fix CVE and hopefully leverage this module graph pruning to reduce some unnecessary dependencies. That's all.
Great. Any questions for Daniel? Bless you. Okay, so first topic then that I brought up, although I think that it was a conversation kind of with Daniel. So I believe that for Azure, the Azure plugin, incrementals are not enabled by default. And so we have someone here asked for support, or sorry, maybe they're not added at all, or it's impossible to, sorry, I should have prepared more. I think it's that, right, that we can't do incrementals at all with the Azure plugin. And the question is, do we want to enable that? Does anyone remember more detail than that? I'm fumbling a bit.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I think it's pretty much a flag because incrementals were introduced after Velero was originally written. The question, so this is just internal to Azure. It's not anything where we're going to see it. I think the question, like Daniel says here, is what's the trade-off? Why is it that Azure didn't enable these everywhere?
Are we sure that wasn't done? I thought I remember one of the releases a year or so ago. I was actually looking at Nolan had a PR. No, it was actually Stephen Ware add support for incremental snapshots of Azure disks. The commit from June of 2020.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I mean, that was before I started actually to be here all the time, I think.
Would it make sense then? I don't know, Scott, do you think you can dig up that PR and
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the commit history. It looks like it was PR number 51. No, sorry. Actually, I don't see a PR number here. I just realized. No, here it is. Pull request, merge pull request number 52 from Stephen Ware supporting incremental snapshot. So for this is in the Velero plugin for Microsoft Azure. Looks like it would have been PR number 52.
I want to drop it in the chat, by the way, so if anyone else wants to take a look.
Let me pull it up. I was looking at the commit history locally, but let me actually look at the PR in GitHub.
And let me ask, is this something that we want to chat a little bit about now in real time, or does it make sense for everyone to look at this and we get back to it at the next meeting?
Yeah, I hope Scott can add some comment to reference that PR you're talking about, and we can continue discussion in this issue. Because I added that comment based on my discussion with Dave and Bridget, I recall. And yeah, because we are curious why this is not enabled by default, because it's not generic enough to apply to all cloud providers. I think that's what we talked about, Bridget.
I mean, the other providers already had incremental support in the plugins.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because this is all internal, right? So the vSphere plugin is different because the way that we're handling the data movement, but this is just internal to Azure Block. And the other thing is that we need to use this in order to do change block tracking. So as we move forward with being able to extract data, we're going to have to use these anyway. Otherwise, we're going to have to do full backups every time of the disks. So
Okay.
yeah, it looks like Snap's incremental config key. So it's optional. Look at the PR. It looks like there's an option to set it. It's just not by default. Yeah. Yeah, so look at the PR. It's currently an option. You can turn it on, but it's optional. So
Is
we
it
can certainly close
possible-
this PR out and just tell them, hey, use this, so it's not documented. I don't think it actually got documented. Well, it did. It's in, yeah, it's not well documented.
Actually, just a quick, I'll make kind of an announcement, or it's not really a discussion topic. Our Velero writer has been on leave, but now she will be coming back November 1st. So if we have documentation things, we are likely to be able to kind of maybe do a bit of a push to improve our Velero documentation. So Velero doc. So just specifically for this one, it sounds like we could potentially, yeah, if we have an issue, we can definitely create a doc issue so that she could help with that. So for this one, do we want to, I'll leave that there. It sounds like Daniel, you'll maybe follow up and look into that a little more. And does, do you want to?
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, and feel free
Yeah,
to.
yeah. So based on the PR, I think this is already implemented, and there is an MD file. In the.
Yeah, it's just that the MD file only defines like the volume snapshot location. It doesn't discuss anywhere in the regular write-up like you can use incrementals. So you have to be digging fairly deeply. If you're just reading the top, it's not obvious. That's all it's missing.
So I think the follow-up work will be updated doc on the website too.
Yeah, I think
Somehow,
that's
expose it.
worthwhile. I mean, certainly the answer to this person is, here's the option, you can use it.
Okay.
Great. Well, Daniel, thank you for bringing this, highlighting this, because yay that we've all learned that this, and thank you, Scott, for remembering this
Yes,
PR.
thanks,
So
Scott.
good, amazing.
Thanks, Scott.
So good that we know that it's now an option, and it sounds like, yeah, either Daniel, you can directly update the documentation, or if it's a bit more complex, then you can open a ticket that we can give to Abby. That'd be great. Okay, good to move on, or do we have any more things to discuss for this? Okay. So the next item, also thank you again to Daniel for this item. We've talked about it a little bit, but it would be good to bring up now that he and others on the team have more context. The question is, of course, what versions of Velero do we want to kind of support from a, I don't know what to call it, community support perspective, not from the literal code, what works with the code, but what do we want to support? And then that's relevant really to Kubernetes versions. Daniel, do you want to speak more on this, or I can talk about what we had been thinking, but I'm happy to let you discuss if you want.
Yeah, the background is, yeah, after I joining this team, I found we don't have a clear definition regarding the support metrics. There are two dimensions I can think about. First, what versions of Velero do we support? Second, what versions of Kubernetes do we support? Because we constantly saying, getting issues from community users saying, hey, I'm using, for example, Velero 1.1 on Kubernetes 1.15, and I see this issue. It's not realistic for us to support all these combinations. So I wish to propose we narrow down the support scope. Yeah, per internally discussion, we wanna support like N-1 version of Velero and N-2 versions of Kubernetes. That is to say, for example, right now we released Velero 1.7. We support n-1, so we support 1.6.x and 1.7.x Velero. So that means if a user sees issue using Velero 1.5, we will not go further to digging into this issue. We just ask him to upgrade and see if he can reproduce this issue. Yeah. And similarly for Kubernetes, so we support 3 recent release minor versions of Kubernetes. For example, 1.20, 1.21, 1.22. As for now.
Yeah, I would be careful on the Kubernetes. I think on the n-1 makes sense on Velero. The thing with Kubernetes is that, especially when people are trying to get off old versions of Kubernetes, one of the last things they need, the last thing you do before you decommission a Kubernetes cluster is possibly back everything up, which means, you're going to want to run Velero on that. So I know in the past, the approach we've taken, and aside from not documenting it well enough, which we need to do, is basically, we would support a certain version until something changed in the code that says we're not going to do this, and then we made an explicit decision. Like, I guess the most recent thing was the CRDs are now, some of the validations in CRDs doesn't work with Kubernetes. I think it's 1.11 and older, so it's 1.12 and later that we had been supporting. There was some concern when we went to the V1 CRDs that we would drop all support for older versions, but we ended up instead creating the split so that the V1 Beta 1 and the V1 CRDs are created, and that was to support Kubernetes between 1.12 and 1.15. So I don't know the best way of kind of knowing when to bring that forward. And as I said in the past, I know we basically said we'll support it until something comes up that we know doesn't work, and then we change the support for the next release. If for example, Velero 1.8 adds some features that would be difficult to support on Kubernetes 1.14, then that might be the point that we'd say, okay, it's 1.15 and later. But I think if we define that too narrowly, we prevent people from backing up their stuff on the old clusters to move to new ones.
I think that's a valid concern, but from another perspective, we don't have the bandwidth to test all these combinations.
Yeah, I get that too. So that's why I'm saying, I think the n-1 for Velero is certainly something we need to do. For the Kubernetes versions, I'm not sure the answer. I think we need to be careful about not making it too narrow. I don't know if there's also some value in defining kind of level, saying, this is a version that we definitely support. We guarantee it works, and then maybe there's a range of versions that it's, we'll try to support kind of best effort, but we can't guarantee it. And then there's a certain versions that we know don't work, and we say, look, we know 1.11 doesn't work at all. You can't even install it. Don't even try. 1.12 or what, maybe there's certain versions that we can't guarantee support on because we don't test fully on, but it's known not to break, or it's not known to break rather. I just, again, the concern is if we have a situation where people can't use Velero to back up their workloads to move to newer clusters, that kind of becomes a barrier to using Velero for them.
I understand, but if we do not test it when we are, because I think in future we plan to do some fundamental refactor to introduce this new item snapshot and stuff. So how do we guarantee, if we don't test it, how do we guarantee that this version of Velero still work on the older version of Kubernetes?
And that's even, I guess, even with 1.7 is an issue, because I think with 1.7, even with the automated and the end-to-end tests, we only do what, 1.16 and newer, 1.16 to 1.22, I think. So even there, I guess the question is for 1.15, we claim it's supported, but like you said, we're not testing it. So I don't really.
Yeah, so I think we've got, I think, Scott, I think your concerns are very valid. We've got some requirements from, the paid side of, we can't just, we've got Kubernetes versions that we need to support from the VMware side because we've shipped these as things we sold to people.
And that may not have the same answer. I mean, I don't know what distinction you make on the VMware side between kind of, the project that's upstream and what you ship to customers. You
It's
may well
exactly
have
the
a
same.
situation where you have a customer you're required to support, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore, if the customer says, hey, this isn't working, you might spend VMware resources to do it. That may or may not be a combination that's officially supported by Velero. I don't know. I don't know if you can make that
Yeah,
distinction.
I think we will, because we definitely are on the hook for that, but
Right.
we're not. So if somebody who's on the paid support is going to come by and say, hey,
Yeah.
this thing needs to work, we're going to be like,
Right.
yes, we're going to do that.
I mean,
And I think we also have to be thinking about not breaking things, like
Yeah.
the breaking changes that are obviously breaking changes we need to be careful about.
right.
And I think Daniel's concern is just that, how are we able to say to people who come to us with, they're running Kubernetes 112 and they're like, hey, I did this whole different thing with Kubernetes 112 and it doesn't work, and would you please fix it? And we're like, no.
Right, exactly. And on the Red Hat side, we're kind of in some of that situation too, because we're using Velero for these, OpenShift 3 to 4 migrations. Well, OpenShift 3 is Kubernetes 111. It's out of support for Velero. So I know that, if we get a customer for MTC migrations and Velero is breaking on the 3 cluster side, that's kind of on us to fix, not us meaning the Red Hat team, not the Velero team, because it's something we're knowingly using out of support at this point because we started on it. But that's a distinction we can make because it's a product that we're giving to customers based on Velero. But when you're talking about what Velero as a project, as a release supports, that's a more, that's something you're testing, and you're going to say, hey, if you're using this version, it's supported, it needs to work. And I don't know if there's room to make these other distinctions again, where, there may be certain combinations that we think will probably work, but you're on your own, versus other combinations that we just know right off the bat won't work. Don't even try. I don't know if that distinction is
Yeah.
make or not, or if we limit ourselves to saying, here's what we support, and we're not going to say anything outside of that because we don't want to commit to anything.
Yeah, I mean, because support, community support is community support. We're not necessarily signing up for anything, but we do, you've got the whole range of stuff. People who show up as like, hey, please fix my Kubernetes cluster for me. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, could we just be explicit, basically say something like, we test Velero on there's 2 things that come to mind. One is if someone asks for help, like, is there a certain version of Kubernetes where we say you have to upgrade to this minimum version of Kubernetes before we'll investigate your problem? And 2, do we want to be explicit about what versions we test on? Like, instead of saying it's supported or not, could we say either or both of those things?
Yeah, I think we could certainly do the latter, and we should be opening up like the test results, because we're starting to actually do testing and we actually have results so we can output at this point. So we know which platforms and which versions we've tested, and if we can have other people, running like end-to-end tests, for example, against those during the release process, and other platforms that we're not covering internally, I think that would be really useful. We maybe have like a place where that goes.
Yeah, but that still came to the situation. For example, when we release 1.7, the user use 1.7 to back up his workload on Kubernetes, say 1.14, can see some issue. Do we want to fix that or not? We should fix that, you mean? We do not test it, but we will fix it.
We're probably going to take that on a case-by-case basis. I mean, it's going to be like, because I think, there's the very good point that we need to support quite a ways back. I mean, migration, and some people just haven't upgraded. But then it's like, yeah, there's this new feature that we added that doesn't work on 114. Sorry, that's, is it important for us to fix that feature for 114? I don't know. And yeah,
I mean, we already did that to some degree in terms of, putting some effort into things that we aren't, I mean, again, because right now we're not doing end-to-end testing on anything that uses the V1 Beta 1 CRDs, but we're still shipping the V1 Beta 1 CRDs. In
Yeah, I think
1.7.
we are we? I think we are doing end-to-end testing on.
Oh, I
some of
thought
the
it was just
older-
1.16 and newer. Maybe
I'm
I'm
not sure what.
wrong on that.
No, that's exactly why we should have the test matrix, like what we tested out.
Right,
to look
and that
at.
goes back. Is there room for a situation where we say this is this is what we test, and there's some range outside of what we test that it should work, but we don't have the resources to test all the time, and therefore that's a little kind of the gray area there. I don't know if there's any room for that, or it goes back to the what we claim to support and what we do test are exactly the same, and we just don't attempt to worry about anything outside of that.
Yeah, I think we can add a document to clarify that, to clarify what version we tested and what version we think that should work. But we try our best to help the users, but we cannot guarantee we can test it. I think
So maybe
that makes sense to me.
we can write up a doc and submit that for review and pass it around.
Sure.
And at least at least the content, or folks, I was even just kind of making up this issue now. Do we agree about the content of what I've put here? Or I don't know how to write that very last bit. Anyways, what is true though?
And that last bit, at some point, we may want to have, again, this basically matrix of, have a list of versions, 1.70, 1.71, 1.63, and then the list of Kubernetes versions, 1.16 to 1.22 is tested on or whatever, because that it may be a situation where, for example, 1.63 was only tested on, 1.22, but by the time maybe there was a 1.64 bug fix release that came out after Kubernetes 1.23 came out, and so that version might have additional ones. So you kind of need the kind of two-dimensional matrix to show for each release which versions it was tested with, because when you come out with a new bug fix release, even that might change the number, the testing matrix. And certainly 1.7 versus 1.6 versus 1.8, there's going to be different versions it's been tested with.
I'm thinking, does Kubernetes the community have any support policy, like a certain version of Kubernetes is out of support? You're on your own.
Sorry, say that last bit again.
I mean, does Kubernetes has any support policy? For example, 1.12 is out of support. Do they have any support policy like this?
Yeah, I ever heard that they maybe have this such policy to support for recently released like that. Maybe we can confirm this.
I've just found something, but it's not really clear, so I can probably.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, probably best not to research on the fly. Yeah, well, let's put it this way. So, it sounds like we're all feeling pretty good about this idea of N-1 for Velero releases. And if someone is below N-1, we'll ask them to upgrade. But we can still publicize that PR to get feedback before we do this. Absolutely agree with Scott and Dave that a chart of releases versus what they were tested on is excellent. I think this last bit about if someone says, hey, I have this problem with 1.14, help me. I guess for now, what Dave's saying kind of makes sense. If it's like a huge breaking change, maybe we would deal with it. If it's this specific feature doesn't work, we may not. But I also hear, Daniel, I hear what you're saying. It's much nicer to be able to just say, hey, you got to upgrade your, well, yeah, that.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
not.
I mean, even we use this approach, I think we'd better still have a clarified version, right?
How about this? Could we say something like if you're trying to regularly run Velero on this version of Kubernetes and below, we're not going to support it. If you're only trying to migrate or upgrade, then maybe we're basically like functionality that's for a specific migration or upgrade, we may be more willing to support, to Scott's point, to let them get off of that version of Kubernetes. But if they're regularly trying to run Velero, that's what we're not going to support. Would that be feasible, or how do people feel about that? I'll try to write as people think.
I mean, it would certainly would limit the amount of support we'd have to provide, although it's, you know, you're still using a significant portion of Velero functionality to, you know, because basically anything on the backup side you're potentially using, you know.
Yeah,
I guess that's the
I was
distinction.
wondering if it was gonna still be a very broad thing. Yeah.
Well, we also have compatibility between Velero versions. So we should be able to take a backup generated by Velero
that's true.
1.1 and restore it into a newer cluster.
That's true.
So,
And that's useful if we're able to say, for example, although the N-1 kind of constrains us a bit there too, because what that means is that the oldest supported way of doing a backup today is with 163.
that's true.
And you know, but you know, if we're saying that 163 is supported for 112 and older and newer, and 1.7 is, you know, for 115 and newer, just to, you know, 116 and newer, that would give you a path there. But then once 1.8 comes out, now we no longer have a supported Velero for, you know, Kubernetes 1.14. If we were taking that approach.
Here's another question though. Can't we make our support policy more narrow? This is community best effort support even. It makes it a lot easier for the maintainers and for the community, the support community to kind of more carefully or more quickly go through issues and focus on the ones that are kind of easiest to, I don't know. But then like if someone, I don't know, I guess that then I think that they can always push back and say, please, I'm in a real pick, you know, like I'm really stuck on this. I don't know. I'm just wondering whether we can make it more narrow because we're not really guaranteeing support either way. This is just best effort. I don't know. Yeah.
And that's where I think the distinction between, you know, this probably works, we didn't test it because it's not part of our, you know, we don't have the bandwidth for that, versus we know this won't work because we added code that's incompatible with this version. You know, and that goes back to, you know, probably what you would tell a VMware customer that you're supporting Velero with a, you know, with a support contract is going to be a little bit different, because then you dedicate resources to that customer. If they get a bug, you know, you can fix that for them, even if the community support is not there. I don't know. I mean, that's.
And we might cut them a new release. We might cut them a like 1.3, you know, or 1.1.2, because that's what they have installed. That's what works for them. And we have to do a minor patch to that. It's a possibility. So I think one of the important things is like the guidance for ourselves as we're developing, as you know, like we had this discussion last time about, hey, do we introduce a breaking change with the new CRDs? And it was really good. And we're probably going to have other breaking changes, and some of them we're not going to know we broke stuff. So we probably need to have a policy of like picking like a baseline version that we expect things to at least work, you know, pass the EDE tests on, and continue to run against that. And any breaking changes would have to be approved, you know, or, you know, consciously approved, not like, oops, hey, we broke it by accident.
Yeah. Well, and that's where if we add something, you know, and you're doing the you know, the end-to-end test that they're suddenly failing on, say, Kubernetes 1.16, then we can make the decision. Well, you know, hey, Velero 1.8's coming out. Is it okay now to drop support for 1.16? Or do we need to find a way to do this new thing without breaking it? But if you have tests that break on you, then you can have that conversation before the release.
Yes.
So then,
and that also goes back to my previous point of, you know, rather than having an inflexible, you know, N-2 or whatever, is that let's, you know, we have this notion of what we support. We shouldn't take something off the support with a new version without good reason. And, you know, a new feature is a good reason. If we, and it may be, you know, look, it's taking too long to run tests now that Kubernetes, you know, 1.28 is out. We don't really need to be testing on 12 versions. Let's take some off the end here. That would make sense as well. But again, those kinds of decisions for future versions. And now that we define what we're supporting for, say, 1.7, then when 1.8 comes out, we can have that conversation. You know, okay, we now have 2 new Kubernetes releases that 1.7 didn't support. Do we have a larger set of releases we're testing against, or do we need to narrow that down because it's too many to support? Or if there's some feature that says we really have to narrow the support because we're adding something to support, you know, a new 1.8 or 1.9 feature that doesn't work on Kubernetes 1.16, you know, then you'd have to make an explicit decision to remove that from the support matrix.
we're kind of putting into words, I think what you were saying, forgive me if I missed the last
Yeah.
details. So that we've already talked about.
We
Oh.
also want a greatest version. I was just saying your table to two. So it's a oldest Kubernetes version and newest Kubernetes version, because, for example, Velero 1.6.2 won't work with Kubernetes 1.22.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
we don't have the V1 CRDs. And there will be similar things in the future where something happens. You know, Kubernetes introduces a breaking change that we need a new Velero version to accommodate, which means the older Velero version will no longer work on that newest Kubernetes.
So I think at least we can clarify what version we do test on.
Right.
So we can explicitly mention that in the document.
Yeah.
And we also imply that we try not to break Velero on the earlier version of Kubernetes, but we don't test it.
Yeah.
And in future version, there's no guarantee. If we know something's break, we will explicitly point out, but may or may not work. I think that's the best we can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and we certainly can say, and I don't know if this fits in this table or not, but I mean, I think we do know, for example, that, you know, neither 1.6 nor 1.7 will work with Kubernetes 1.12. So, or no, 1.11. So,
yeah,
you know, we know that 1.12 is absolute minimum to even install Velero, because our CRDs won't work with 1.11. But 1.12 to 1.15 is kind of this gray area of it will probably work, but it's not tested with our automated testing.
Okay. So what I would suggest is, I think I'm really glad we had this conversation. So I think write document, and now I will say making these tables is actually going to take a lot of time, especially this, well, we'll see, maybe. I would suggest like write document and fill in easy to know values. And then basically in terms of, we'll get the sense of what we are considering showing, we'll have the PR done. And if we all agree that, yes, this is what we want to communicate, this is how we want to show it as a document, then we can go back in and fill in the details as a last step. I don't want to put a lot of effort into developing a table that then we say, nope, we don't want to show it.
Yeah, and I think some of those values will be easier. I mean, what do we test against? You know, that should be based on what we're currently running with end-to-end tests on PRs, for example, and on release. I mean, that's something we should be able to say, you know, we're already running tests on these versions, you know, up through Kubernetes 1.22, for example, we know to work, you know.
Yeah, and maybe it will be easy to do. I haven't had, because I'm not involved in the testing, I have less sense of that. But all that's to say is this is great.
I had one other question in terms of support. We're saying N-1, so for example, 1.70 and 1.6.3, but are we still supporting 1.6.2 or 1.6.1, or do we only support the most recent? I mean, how does that work within a series? You know, if I'm on 1.6.1, 1.6.2 comes out, 1.6.3 comes out, at one point is 1.6.1 cease to be supported?
Good question.
Yeah, I would suggest they upgrade to the latest patch version in this minor version first before we really dig into the issue.
So then does that mean we only support the latest patch version for each? Or do we support, I'm just thinking, you know, Velero 1.7.1 comes out next week. 3 days later, a bug comes in for 1.7.0, someone's on. Do we say, you know, try again on 1.7.1? We don't support 1.7.0 after 1.7.1 comes out, period?
Look, if this, I think the change we introduce in each patch release is relatively small, and that means
should be, yeah.
Yeah, and that means if we release 1.7.1 and people report a bug in 1.7.0, if we do not know we fix it, it's probably still in 1.7.1.
Oh yeah.
So that makes this process easier, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, okay. So in that case, we will support any patch release within the supported window, within the supported range. Here, note that we will support every patch release in the supported minor releases. Okay, good. Thank you, Scott, for raising that. I'm glad that we can kind of get this discussion going. Okay, so as I mentioned, we'll work on this probably once in November, once our doc writer returns. Okay, well, that was a long discussion, but again, I really found that really valuable. Thanks, folks. Frankie,
Hello.
tell us what do you want to talk about?
Well, I had so much success getting people's ideas last time. I thought I might repeat it. This is for a different issue. This is for when a backup storage location is deleted, remove associated backups and restic repos from the cluster. So I have a summary of what I thought they wanted towards the bottom. Yes, here. So my understanding of this is that when they do the command Velero backup location delete with the BSL name, which by the way was implemented with Velero 1.6, then they would like these two things to be deleted: associated backups and associated restic repositories. Now, Carlicia commented that a BSL is only a representation of storage and deleting it will never delete the backups uploaded to that storage. This is intentional. Okay, but she also suggested that maybe a forced delete of backups associated with BSL when the BSL is deleted is okay. So and I also mentioned that Nolan suggested that maybe we could work on issue 2697, which is related to restores, but I kind of don't think they're not close enough to work on together, especially with the design I'm proposing. So if we go to the next section, my proposed design, I was thinking instead of a force, we could
Well,
have
hold on.
Go ahead.
So I thought there was a disconnect between Carlicia's analysis and what's being asked. And if I read what you're saying here is you think it currently actually does delete the backup resources.
No. Does it say?
That
No,
as
that's
it is
my
currently, the delete backup request controller will delete backup resource, volume snapshots associated with backup. That would be bad.
Wait,
Restic snapshots under
where
my
are you?
proposed design.
Mhm.
So I thought the issue was that when we delete the backup storage location, there's a bunch of resources left in the Kubernetes cluster, backup resources that don't go away.
Right.
And
Yeah. And I think part of the confusion, I think we need to be careful because there's a lot of things going on here. The things that the delete backup request deals with, it sounds like those are things that are not in the cluster, but in the actual the S3 bucket or whatever, and in the backup storage location. So when you delete a backup using a delete backup request, we actually remove those resources.
that's correct. And that's actually a request to delete a backup. So that's
right.
exactly.
you want to
So
get rid of
Dave,
the backup.
yes, Dave. So don't get confused. Delete backup request is a completely different controller. And my proposal.
You're right, because it shouldn't be in your proposal. That's why it's confusing.
No, but I was hoping that.
So what we don't want to do is we don't want to delete everything in the backup storage location. We don't want to do that. There's
just only the backup resource and the restic, right?
Oh,
Those are
in
the
the cluster,
things.
but in the cluster, not in the storage location. In other words, I think about it from the, I guess the way I'm looking at this is that say I have two clusters, you know, because I want to migrate some workloads from cluster 1 to cluster 2. So I create a backup storage location in both clusters that points to the same S3 bucket. So that means when I create a backup in cluster 1, the sync controller in cluster 2 creates, you know, the Velero backup resource in cluster 2. I do my backups from cluster 1, I restore them to cluster 2. I'm done with this backup storage location in cluster 1 now. So I delete the backup storage location. But I still have these Velero backups and other resources in the cluster 1.
I
want those to go
misunderstood.
away, but I don't want deleting the backup storage location in cluster 1 to actually delete the S3 resources, because then my cluster 2 loses access to those.
I see.
So
I totally
in cluster
misunderstood.
resources, not the backup itself.
These are the actual, like, just the Kubernetes resources, the backup.
Right, exactly.
Like,
they're just hanging around in garbage.
The resource, not the JSON files that were created during backup that have been uploaded to S3. Okay, I need to rewrite my idea. So thank you. That was very helpful. I definitely got confused between the the backup JSON files that are in S3 versus the backup resources that are only in the Kubernetes cluster. All right,
Yeah.
I'll get back to rewriting this. Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thanks. Yeah, because this is simply stuff that's hanging around that you can't even use, because you say like Velero restore and you use one of the backups that's there but doesn't have a backup storage location, it's just going to fail.
And not only that, but and all those backups that are still there, you end up getting your Velero log files filled with this backup storage location is not found every time it's iterating over those backups.
So we want to just do what the issue requests is, just get rid of the resources that are the restic volume snapshot. Sorry, it's the restic snapshots and the backup resource.
Well, it would be the rest again, the Kubernetes resources. So that would be the pod volume backups, I'm guessing, and pod volume restores, or would be what we're talking about.
Right. Yep, they're the pod volume backup resource.
Again, we're just deleting Kubernetes resources here, not we're not touching the S3 bucket or Azure or whatever whatever the external storage is.
Got it.
Yeah, and be careful about like CSI snapshots. If you start going towards deleting all the CSI snapshots, let's talk.
That's really bad.
Yeah,
that sounds really bad.
Well, we've already got a huge problem with the CSI snapshots, but we need to work through that. But in any case.
So does that mean I need a force flag, or should it just by default?
This should be by default.
Just get rid of the Kubernetes resources. Okay.
Yeah, because again,
I like that.
Basically, another way of looking at this is that anything you delete when you remove the backup storage location, I imagine would just come back automatically if you re-add the backup storage location. Because when you add the new backup storage location, if you add it back, the sync controller, the backup sync controller, sees all this stuff and puts it back.
Puts the backup resource.
In other words, if you create a backup storage location that already has backups in that bucket, then the backup sync controller sees those and says, "Oh, you have backups there that aren't in my cluster. I'm going to create these things." And so the Kubernetes resources get created. So anything that you're deleting, cleaning up when you delete the backup storage location should come back automatically if you were to re-add that. That would be a good test case to make sure you did the right things. Anything you remove, when you delete it, should come back when you re-add that backup storage location again.
Makes sense. I think I've seen that happen personally.
Yeah, which is why if you just, if I just do a, kubectl delete on a backup resource and I don't use the delete backup request, if I just delete the Kubernetes resource, then the next time that backup sync controller runs, it recreates it.
Right. For me, the way I've seen it is I've created a brand new cluster, installed Velero, hooked it up to an existing S3, which had the backups, and I see all these backups reappear.
Yep. And that's the design, right? So that you're then able to restore from those.
Right.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. That's all I had.
Cool. Thanks.
Wonderful.
And by the way, you will write before implemented, you will write like a formal design, right? In the design proposal folder or somewhere.
I was gonna just, if it was simple, I was just gonna make a comment saying my design. But if you wanted me to, I can just make a PR with a simple design.
If you do not change the user interface, I think that's not necessary. But if you add a flag, we will need it.
We're going to start asking people to do design docs. It doesn't have to be a big one, but a page should be plenty. I mean, whatever this is, what you've got here is fine. Just put it in an MD file.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and put my design in an MD file. Awesome.
Great. Well, Frankie, thank you so much for bringing this up. And I think this is exactly what we want the community meeting to be for, is kind of talking through issues. So thank you. That was really great. I already covered this. So Feng, plugin versioning.
Yeah, I want to continue working on that to hopefully wrap it up maybe sometime in the next few weeks. So I want to sync up with Bridget to see where she is, and we hopefully we can do finish it up. So Bridget, are you did you got anything done on that on the versioning plugin, or what is the work that so far?
Yeah, I'm available to spend some time on it. I'll ping you. We can set up some time. I'll ping you on Slack tomorrow, and then maybe we can set up a session to go through this and come up with a plan.
Okay. Good. Yeah, hopefully we can wrap it up soon so we can move on.
So thank you very
so
much.
Okay, thank you.
That's so great to hear, Feng. Excellent that you're gonna do some work on that again. So folks, we've got 9 minutes left. And sorry, Feng, did I cut you off too soon? Did you have anything else to add?
Oh, nothing. I have to mute because my daughter is on the same room. So.
Okay. Yeah, so we got 9 minutes left. Any other issues people want to bring up? Cool. I think we're not doing, I don't even quite know how we do community shout outs. Am I right though that maybe we'll wait for Jonas to do it next week? Since it looks like nothing is prepared here. Okay, well, everyone have a great evening or morning, depending on where you are, and we'll see you all another time.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.